Good morning and welcome to this first Rogers Cup presented by National Bank webinar. My name is Ken Crisina, and I'm pleased to host this webinar created exclusively for our loyal ticket holders and some of our precious partners and donors. As you know, this week would have been the week of the Rogers Cup. This also means that we are officially beginning the countdown for next year's tournament. This is the start of a new cycle of planning, and Tennis Canada is already working hard on making our 2021 event a great celebration of our sport and of our loyal fans. We would like to thank you for joining us today. We have two incredible guests with us this morning to discuss what the past few months were like for them, the recent wave of success in Canadian tennis, Rogers Cup, and the resuming of professional tennis events. I would like to ask everyone to stay muted, but I would like to invite you to write your questions in the chat window at any time during the webinar, and I will do my best to get you some answers from our guests. Without further ado, let me introduce our two panelists. Well, he moved to Canada at the age of 3, and he joined Tennis Canada's National Tennis Centre when it first opened in 2007. He has had a successful career thus far, reaching a career high ranking of number 3 in the world in 2016, as well as capturing 8 singles titles on the ATP Tour and reaching the 2016 Wimbledon final. He is one of the most successful Canadian players in the history of our sport, having set a number of records and paving the way for the younger generation of athletes. Milos Raonic, welcome.
Thank you guys for having me.
And our tournament director of the Rogers Cup presented by National Bank in Toronto since 2006. He is recognized and respected tennis figure with an accomplished history. In addition to his work with the tournament, he has been involved with a number of private clubs and has helped with facility expansion and program growth. A dedicated philanthropist, he also founded the Daniel Nestor charity event and the Tennis Canada Go for Gold Fund. Welcome to our tournament director of the Rogers Cup presented by National Bank, Carl Hale.
Thanks, Ken, but you shouldn't have had me follow Milos.
No, should have had him come second, huh? I wanted to get him out there first, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we're in some strange times, guys. So, Milos, maybe for you first, how did you make it through the confinement through the last few months, and what was the kind of the toughest part for you?
I think for me, the toughest part was being away from family for an extended period of time. I hadn't seen my father at all this year. And just saw my mom for one day. So it was many months without seeing them. Obviously, I had the choice to go home when everything broke through, but I'd been on the road. My parents are a little bit older, so I decided for their safety to stay away. But I think for me, the routine and the discipline that tennis requires and training requires got me much further along through the quarantine and through the distancing in the various ways. We always kept training. We always kept doing something because that would swallow up a good chunk of my day and just gave me structure. And I've been on the road since I was about 14 years old on my own. So the isolating part wasn't too difficult for me, but there are certain parts, like when you're on the road, certain things you might take for granted until now, where you want to just be able to step out, go out about for things. And you really understand that that's not the wisest choice at this moment, not only for yourself, but for everybody else. So I've just tried to make the most of it. I came out with a specific set of goals of what I would like to improve and to give myself very clear objectives of how to make the most of this time, because I've never had a break like this, especially during a healthy period of time.
Were you able to take a little bit of a break at the beginning, or did you hit the courts right away and start working and training right away to be ready?
Yeah, I sort of have had success with our sort of off season, which is a 6-week block of training. So I always kept I would take 10 days off, train for 6 weeks, trying to mimic what the off season would be and trying to sort of tailor it to have clear objectives through each stage, and then another 10 days off. But during those 10 days, honestly, I felt more tired than during the 6 weeks of training, just because it was just hard for those 10 days to keep myself busy, to keep finding something to do. So tennis was probably the most of an escape that I've ever had, and all of the training. And to have that, I was so thankful, and to be able to do that aspect, because I know a lot of people in many parts of the world have not had that freedom to be able to go on find a way to work out or get on a tennis court. And I was lucky that I had those resources and that opportunity.
Well, Carl and I train once a month, whether we need it or not. One of our fans is asking if there's any sort of special training you do prior to event that maybe you're not doing when you're practicing. So leading up to maybe Cincinnati and or the U.S. Open, is there anything special that you do before these big events on the tour?
I think for me, the most important thing is the time I spend on court when you're getting close to tennis. I think that's when the fitness really and the time in the gym wears down, and I'm only spending specific with a lot of intention, only about 30 minutes in the gym, and trying to do everything as high intensity as possible, because I'm trying at that point, I'm trying to really fine tune and sharpen things up so I can be my quickest, my sharpest for when I'm out there playing the points. And then I play a lot more points, a lot more sets. I try to play a lot more with other players leading up to tournaments. You know, now we're about 2 weeks out before our first matches, which would be the Western Southern tournament, which will be played at the US Open venue. So now it's about with players meeting up in New York, playing some sets, because that's the one thing I haven't necessarily been around the most. There's a few players I was around, but most of the time we're working on very technical and volume things, which was with a hitting partner and my coach. And so now it's about really cleaning things up and mimicking a tennis match and tennis situations as much as possible.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Carl, what do you feel about the safety measures that the USTA is putting in place for the events coming up?
I just have a quick question for Milos, if that's okay, and I'll answer the question, of course. Is Milos, who do you think this break will benefit? Do you think it'll benefit older or younger players, or do you think it'll benefit like a big server or a baseliner? Do you think anybody benefits in particular from this?
I think the older guys, because they have the experience of matches. You know, it's not going to be their first or 10th Grand Slam. It's going to be their 50th, 60th slam. So I think they'll have the benefit of, you know, being able to ramp things up a little bit quicker. But I think the more important ingredient to it all throughout this period of time is who actually made the most of this time. I think there's going to be some players that are going to need matches really to find themselves and to get back into the rhythm of things, or guys maybe that waited a little too long and started training only 6 weeks before they knew we had a tournament. I think those will struggle because because most of the guys on top are really healthy all the time. Nobody's taking off 6 months. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the most important ingredient. Who really made the most of this hiatus that we had and tried to work on things. I think that will be the most important ingredient for the players that do well.
Ken, sorry, back to your question about the safety measures. I think about the USTA's put in place. Is that right, Ken?
Yes.
Obviously, I think they're necessary, and we can see from a very small sample size at the NBA and NHL that creating a bubble that is strictly adhered to by all parties, you know, the staff, the players, the teams, the media, et cetera, that it works. We need to get tennis back, you know, and in front of the media and in front of our fans and players. So this is the safest and most responsible way, and I think they're doing a really tremendous job.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, look, it's a huge challenge, but I think that the USTA is certainly putting the best foot forward to give the players and the fans the opportunity, firstly, the players to be safe, and then the fans to see some exciting matches. So, Milos, another question from a fan, I believe it's Alan. How much are you paying attention to the players who will not be playing the US Open and the opportunity maybe that this presents for you to capture your first slam?
Not really any. I think this US Open isn't really going to end up being any weaker. I think, for example, in 2016, we had Roger out for a big chunk of the second half of the year. Rafa, you know, he sometimes struggles to stay healthy for all 4 Grand Slams. So that's pretty much the only thing you have. Now you're going to have Andy back. You're going to have Novak there playing. Stan has been out a little bit over the last few years after having that knee operation. So I think it's really not going to change anything. I think where the opportunity really comes more from is not about who's not there. It's about, did you do everything you could during the time off to give yourself the best opportunity? Because who knows how ready and sharp players will be, but players and the best players in the world are going to be there attending, and they're going to be there giving it their best. At the end of the day, nothing changes. A slam is a slam. You have in 73, many of the top players never won, and a clay court player by the name of Jan showed up to Wimbledon and won it. At the end of the day, he's a Wimbledon champion, and no asterisks, nothing. The tournaments go on regardless of who's there. The tournament, the sport is bigger than any individual, and I think that's across every sport. Absolutely, and the depth now is like it's never been before. I think we all agree on that. Our fans as well. So, another question for you, and then I'll hit Carl up. I think it's Yehuda, and I apologize if I've got it wrong. If possible, do you find that there are any emotions that help you on court, such as anger or joy, and do you have any strategies for your emotions? I'm interested to hear your response to this one. I think for me, just because I think everybody's different in that sense, but for me, since in my day-to-day life outside of tennis, I like to think I'm a pretty rational person. So for me, staying level-headed is the most important thing. If I start going into the aspect of too much joy and get too high about the positive things throughout a match, for me, I feel I can fluctuate and get negative about things. So for me, the most important thing is sort of staying calm and clear and having my mind on the right things, the next point, and not sort of embracing too much what just happened, whether that be a positive or a negative, and just sort of keep plugging away, sort of a flat line across. I think that's how I get the best out of myself, because that's also what I practice with. When I am on court, without the pressures, when you're really working on things, you try to really focus on something you're trying to improve, whether it be technical or whether it be situational or whether it be just getting stronger and fitter. But you try to do that with a clear mind so you can get really through it. And I think if you have to play the way you practice and practice the way you play, to be able to transfer those things on court as best as possible. I hear you. That was always my toughest part, as Carl will attest to, keeping it even keel. Eh, Carl?
No comment.
Carl, unfortunately, of course, we've had to postpone the 2020 Rogers Cup, but all of Canada and the world and Milos and our young Canadian players are all waiting forward and looking forward to the 2021 Rogers Cup. Carl, what do you expect for the 2021 Rogers Cup?
Well, I guess it goes back to your first question. One of the key things is there's going to be a tremendous amount of learning that goes into the 2021 Rogers Cup from all of the events and other sports that are going to be running for the next 6 months. We'll learn a lot from the U.S. Open, how they ran their events successfully. So there'll be a lot of, new protocols that'll be put into place that are likely, because this looks like it'll be around for a little while. But I do expect a great player field. The players are really hungry to play. So I think we'll have a full circuit next year. So we'll have a great player field. And, one of the things that actually surprised me more than I thought was the support the Rogers Cup has across Canada and around the world. So, a lot of people are looking forward to it. So we're going to pull off a great event with a great player field. And I hope that we have a Canadian male and female win, because Bianca's defending in Montreal next year. And hopefully our friend here, Milos, will be the champion next year.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing the young Canadians. And Milos, we're still calling you young. I know you're still you're the older of those guys, but we're still calling you young.
I appreciate that.
We're looking forward to seeing you out there. So here's a good question for you, Milos, from Rita. I like the quarantine hair. Are you planning on keeping it long? What's going on there?
Well, it's either I keep the quarantine hair or I go for the Ken look that's going on right now. So I think I'm gonna keep it. I'd like to give it a little bit of a chance. Who knows how long I'll have it for?
Did you sit at all during the quarantine lockdown in front of a mirror with scissors thinking, should I?
No, I never got to that point, but I did ask anybody, like, can I trust you to do this for me? Please, I'll sit on a chair. Like, we can go on one of those YouTube tutorial videos. Can somebody please do this for me? And I just never got around to having that confidence in anybody that was close to me.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Here's another one. Going back to 2016, this question from Owen. What was the pressure like playing Andy Murray on center court, and how did you keep the weight of the occasion from interfering with your tennis?
I think for me, there wasn't that much pressure because I was playing really well. I think that settles myself and a lot of people very quickly because, you know, I had a great win in the semis. I played well all through the tournament. I had a good comeback against Goffin in the fourth round where things were looking not so great for me, 2-0 down, and then played well in Queens, the first grass court tournament as well, making a finals there. So that I wasn't really worried about my tennis. It was more about just handling the occasion. I think for me, the most important thing was just trying to neutralize it in the sense of obviously the crowd was mostly against me, same with the previous match in the semis, but it was about trying to neutralize the scenario, knowing that I'd been there 2 days before playing a semifinal. I got to play another match on there earlier on in the tournament as well, I believe in the third round against Jack Sock. So for me, it was really about stepping out there and just really focusing on the things that are within my control and not getting really bogged down by the whole other aspect that comes with it and playing a final, getting to play on a Sunday at Wimbledon, which means a lot as well. All those kind of things, I was trying to make them as secondary. I didn't necessarily do the best job at it, but those were my clear intentions.
Carl, a question for you. Do you remember Milos's first tournament, first Rogers Cup in Toronto?
Yes, and I also Milos probably doesn't remember it, but I also remember being with Milos and his agent for a little bit during Montreal when he made that great run from the qualifying, and he had match points against, I think it was Gonzalez, right? 7-6 in the
match
third.
point. Yeah,
and I remember there because, and we can be open here. Milos was a little disappointed that he didn't get a main draw wild card there. And I remember we were talking and saying, listen, this'll make you hungry. And boy, he showed, you know, what he has become, you know, in a true competitor. He beat, I think it was 3 guys in qualies or 2 that were all
2 guys
top,
in qualies.
yeah,
I believe it was
Soretta,
Lodra and
Gabashvili. And Gabashvili was like 60 in the world. And then you had that great match with Gonzalez and everybody was like, wow, here we go. And, you know, it's amazing what he's become.
Well, it's funny. I remember Milos's first tournament in Toronto too, because I ran away as the announcer for center court and doing different things around center court. I ran around asking anybody that I could to make sure I got the pronunciation of your name correct, because it's tricky and there's a lot of different people saying it different ways. Not now, but when you were first breaking in. So hopefully I've done you proud by.
No, thank you. But a lot of people sometimes don't understand how important the Rogers Cup has been to me. I don't remember what it was called, but back, I believe it was in 2000, 2002 maybe, they used to have the kids come out and play 10 minutes before the pros would go on court. And I remember I played on court before a Tommy Haas match, you know, when it was at the old venue by York University, and going out there. Then I came back a few years later. I had a broken arm. I was just doing some filming to learn from. And the tournament was kind enough to give me a pass. I had a pass to go into the players' lounge, all these kind of things, so I could learn. But also for me, it was great and motivating to see how professionals, the best players in the world, the people I want to get close to and compete with one day, how they go about their thing. So that aspect to it. Then having a chance to be a hitting partner. I believe when Kiefer made the final against Roger, I was his hitting partner all the way through the final. He was superstitious. He kept asking me to come back, having that opportunity. Then obviously qualifying, playing well in Montreal as a qualifier, but also making that first final there to get into the top 10. All these kind of things, it's really gone full circle for me. So it's more than just the tennis I've played. It's a lot of the exposure I've had at the Rogers Cup that has meant a lot to me.
And I remember, Milos, you had that big doubles win early in your career. You and I think it was Vasek, right?
Me and Vasek over Rafa and Novak.
Djokovic. Yeah. Was that your first one?
No, I played. I think I played before where I lost to Kudryavtsev maybe 2 years before that in the qualies. But I think I lost that year to Hanescu in the first round.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good doubles win.
Yeah, I'm thankful you guys didn't bring up the second round of doubles because we were a little bit on too much of a high and we crashed and burned pretty quickly in the second round.
So
But
Milos,
it's
after that match when you guys beat Nadal and Djokovic.
yeah. I was thankful you put us on an outside court because being on center court and getting beat down the way we did in the next round, I believe, by Meltzer and Peschner.
Yeah.
Was not. We're glad it was only fans on one side of the court. There wasn't much else, much else watching.
Anytime you want a court, we're here to give whatever you want.
Thank you.
Put your hat down a little lower and leave afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
So from Victoria, her question was, how do you feel it's going to be playing in front of an empty stadium at the U.S. Open and also for the Cincinnati event in the same venue?
I think it's going to have an effect on some players. I think it's going to have an effect maybe in the early rounds in the sense of players that get down 2-0. You don't have a crowd that gets behind you, or if you're a player that's up 2-0 and the match stops slipping and maybe the crowd goes against you because they start supporting the other dog. I think it might make a bit of a difference there. I think it won't make the difference amongst the top players because they will have taken time to prepare for this kind of situation. But I think also it might make a difference for a lower ranked player that might be playing against a crowd favorite, because that can be intimidating, especially, you step out on Arthur Ashe against Novak or against a Roger or Rafa, for an example. That can be a little bit intimidating, the noise that comes with that because you're so unfamiliar with it. Whereas now it's almost going to feel like it's a practice, and it could allow some players to be able to really get in it because you have these top guys that they know how to use the crowd well. When they're struggling, they'll try to fire themselves up through the crowd, or when they're playing well, they'll try to sort of keep a player down with that as well. So I think there'll be some kind of fluctuation, but I think that will only really happen in the earlier rounds until players get used to it, because at the end of the day, we play practice sets, we play practice matches with other players with no crowds. So I think that it'll be a minor effect, but it's also going to be unfortunate because the crowds are a big part, especially at Grand Slams, that gives you that energy, that kick. When you're tired, you could be out there for your 4th hour in some really bad heat and all these kind of things. They can give you, a kick when you need it to keep moving forward. So I think it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out.
Wow, we saw that crowd noise last year. And Carl, I think you were there when Serena and Bianca on center court, the noise is deafening, right?
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's what makes our sport great, and all sports great. And unfortunately, for the short term, we won't have it. But hopefully next year we'll start to see some fans trickling back in, if not all. But time will tell. Nobody knows.
So another question from a fan here, Milos, from Miko. What do you think was the best tennis match that you ever played? Is there one that stands out to say, boy, if I could do that every day, this game would be easy?
Yeah, it's tough to say, but you can pick one of those matches where things you play really well, and it feels like you could be out on court for 2 hours, and it feels like everything flew by in 15 minutes because you're not really ever doubting yourself at any point in the match. You're never having that internal conflict. Everything is just going your way. But I think for me, there's other matches that have been more important where there has been some give and go, some change in momentum. I think for me, one of my better matches was a 4th round against Wawrinka at the 2016 Australian Open. I know that year I did better at Wimbledon, but I felt like I was actually playing better at the Australian Open. I was up 2-1 against Andy in the semifinals. And then when I got hurt, so I felt like I was playing a little bit better than I was playing at Wimbledon. But if I don't find a way to play well, but also turn things around in that match with Stan, I don't have that opportunity later on. So I think that's one where I really played well, but there was enough difficulties that I went through the match that I handled them well and in the best way possible to sort of come out the winner there.
Carl,
yes,
with the hockey playoffs going on right now in Canadian cities, do you think that we could have held a closed door Rogers Cup event?
It's a really good question. We made the best decision under the circumstances. A few things people should know is public health was number one. Not just the fans, but the ball kids, the players, their teams, the media, the staff, the volunteers. So we thought that was in jeopardy. Media, as these other sports have come back, the NBA and NHL, they have a ton of games on broadcast each day. So it would have been difficult to find a place on broadcast. Quarantining the players, as you saw with the Blue Jays, at the time, it wasn't possible to get the players to come in to quarantine without doing quarantine for 14 days. And the no fans model, it doesn't work at this time financially. You look at the Rogers Cup, and we're a premier event. We have 80 million viewers worldwide. People recognize it as a gold standard event, and we just didn't feel we could put that on and present it. So we took a pass this year and postponed it to next year, where we think we'll be able to deliver that.
I'm happy to hear that. Going forward, we're really looking forward to the 2021 Rogers Cup for sure. Milos, a question from a fan, Miguel. What was your biggest challenge for you during the lockdown period? Was there a physical challenge, mental, professionally? And I'm going to add a little twist to it. Did you learn something new? Did you take up cooking? Did you play Scrabble? Was there something new that you started?
Yeah, so I think for me, the biggest challenge was we were training really hard. When you put in a lot of hard days, fatigue sets in, especially, the first 2-3 weeks, you're feeling fresh and you're going hard. Week 4, week 5, once the fatigue sort of starts building up, it's the hardest part is not knowing what necessarily comes next, when you're going to get to implement the training, when you're going to get to implement all these things. At that point, really early on, we just knew we were out till after Wimbledon. We didn't know what was going to happen then. Obviously, things were changing around the world. There were certain countries that were doing better. Things were seeming, a little bit difficult in certain places. Places were locked down. You didn't know. Tennis's number one difficulty is that players have to come from everywhere in the world. I think when you have these team sports, you can get all these players because they're committed to those cities normally throughout the year. They can come to that city early, they can quarantine, and then they can go and move along to wherever their bubble is with a team, with a whole infrastructure around them. Not only do the players have to come from all over the world, also the players' staff, depending who the player works with. They might even not have access to their own coaches, to their own physios for a long period of time. So I think that part was the toughest, is knowing what comes next, putting in all that work, putting in all that effort, 2 a day is about 6 hours of training a day, and not knowing what comes next. But I think that was really overcome easily for me by having a clear objective that whenever tennis did come around, I felt like I was going to be ready. And I felt like it was what was keeping me healthy. If I stopped too long and tried to ramp it up quickly, I wasn't sure if my body would be able to hold up with that, especially with the unfortunate health circumstances I've had over the last few years. So I think that was the best thing to overcome. And now that we have something in sight, it's very, very motivating. And I'm looking forward to it a lot. But the one thing I have to say that I did pick up was a little bit of cooking, which for me, to go from no cooking to a little bit of cooking is a big leap forward. So now I just got to get it up to maybe cooking twice a day instead of just once. But there'll be a time for that. Picked up some board games that we started playing. This game that I really got hooked on, and I'm very competitive. So there was a few people around me that played Rummy Cube. I never played it before. And the first thing I did, I didn't like the way the first game went, where I lost it. I downloaded an app on my phone, and I'm pretty sure I stayed up till 1 in that morning learning and making sure that I figured out how to play it as best as possible, because I don't want to go back there losing again. So that's been a lot of board games I treat that way.
Well, I'm sure with you're known as one of the hardest workers on court and off court. So I'm sure if it's a board game, if it's cooking or anything else, you're working like crazy to be one of the best of that. So I'll make sure to hide the board games the next time I see you, unless it's one that I'm really, really good at. Another question from Jeff, and we're going to wrap it up here soon, but he's wondering who's the most difficult person that you've had to play against between Novak, Rafa, and Roger. And I'm sure this is a question that you'd rather not answer because you don't want them to be listening in. But for our fans, which of those three guys is the trickiest for you?
I think Novak's been the most difficult. I've had match points against him. He's the one player I haven't overcome yet. I think just the way he plays, it returns incredibly well. Doesn't have a clear strategy against him. He doesn't have big weapons like Roger and Rafa do. but he's a lot more well-rounded around. And that not having a clear idea of what you need to do against him going into a match leading up can make things difficult. But also Novak has, since I've been on tour, has by far been the best player. I believe amongst the three of them, he's, he came out, broke through in 2011. I believe he won 47 matches in a row to start the year off that year. All these kind of things. And he held all 4 slams at once. He's been number one the most. He's not far from Roger in weeks at number one. He's not far from the other 2 guys in catching up to them in slams. So for me, he's been, I'd say, a step ahead in terms of difficulty and unease to play against.
Yeah, I certainly, I think, Carl, you can attest that any of those 3 guys we wouldn't want to see our names up against in any event. That's for sure.
Milos, who finishes with the most slams?
I don't know, but in my personal argument, I don't think that's a deciding factor in who's going to be considered the greatest of all time. I have a different opinion on that. I think there's a lot of things. I think head-to-head is very important. I think winning all the Master Series is very important. Holding all 4 at the same time is incredibly important. A gold medal is incredibly important. But for me, since I play in an individual sport, the head-to-head, it's not like you can hide behind teammates and all these kind of things and see like, hey, this team did this, who picked it up. In tennis, it's head-to-head is extremely important. But I think that I can't imagine them having too much of a gap between one another in terms of slam numbers. I think it's going to get tighter, and who knows who's going to end up getting a step or 2 ahead of the other guys.
Last question for everyone here, and this is going to come from Karen. After New York, do you have plans, Milos, to head to Europe? What's the plans after New York for you?
Yeah, for me, it's to head over. I believe there's going to be two tournaments available, Kitzbühel and Rome, leading up to the French Open. I'll play in Rome. That's sort of my plan. I want to play a full schedule towards the end of the year. I've done a lot of training. I've gotten myself ready. I'm glad, even though I was planning on playing on clay this year, my health has been much better with the way me and my team have been working. So I want to play the clay events. We just have to see how things play out. We came into this schedule thinking that we had 7 tournaments to start within about 8 weeks, 1 500, 3 Masters, 2 Grand Slams, and now we're down to two Masters and 2 Grand Slams. And I think the most important thing, and like you see, the USTA is really making an effort to make a bubble, to really apply those things. I think that's something that they have put a lot of attention to and gone really beyond trying to somehow put together a tournament where we feel safe, because at the end of the day, the US has been one of the hardest hit places. I just hope that the other tournaments continue to act as vigilantly as the US Open has. I know there's other tournaments that are trying to implement things. I know another tournament, the French Open's planning on having fans. Personally, I don't know if there's a comfort for me amongst that, having 20,000 people around per day, especially because there's a lot of interaction between the fans unless they start closing off things when players start walking out to courts and all those kind of things. So I hope that we set a standard, a very safe and high-end standard of providing the best possible opportunities for the tournaments, for the players, and that it can continue and I can play as many tournaments throughout the rest of the year, indoor season. I know there's no Asia for us on the back end of the French Open, but on the indoor season, I hope those can continue well if we start off and have very successful tournaments at the beginning.
Yeah, well said. Well, Milos, on behalf of Carl, myself, and everybody at Tennis Canada, we'd like to thank you for all of our fans from across this country and the world that have tuned in to listen to you. And certainly we want you to know that even though we will not be there in New York, every Canadian will be waving a flag in their living room, in their basement, in their family room, and cheering you on in the tournaments to come. And you have always been a very proud supporter of tennis in this country. We know you are a very proud Canadian, and we appreciate what you have done for tennis in this country and how you have helped our younger than you players coming along. And we love watching you out there, whether it's Davis Cup, an event, whether we can be there or not be there. We want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for everything that you've done for us in this country.
Thank you very much. And I want to point out, I really appreciate Tennis Canada really going far and beyond. I know the efforts that were made to make the Rogers Cup happen. I know that because of the government guidelines in Quebec, they had to cancel the women's a little bit earlier, but the men, there was always an effort being made. I was in constant contact with Michael Downey, and he was trying to figure out how to best make it happen, reaching out to the health minister of Ontario. I had written an email, all these kind of things to really try to make this happen. So I'm really thankful for the effort. And I'm thankful that the men get to come back in 2021 to Toronto. And so I get to play in front of a home crowd a year from now. That's a very special thing for me.
And Milos, on behalf of the tournament, be safe with you and your team on your travels throughout the end of the year, you and all the rest of the Canadians. And we look forward to watching you on the court. Thank
you guys very much.
And Milos, I got to tell you right now, my text box is blowing up with people from across the country saying, thank you, Milos. Good luck, Milos. We have Karen, Amara, Rachel, Shirley, Jeff, Stam, Tula from Tennis Canada, Tula Bateman, Rob Swan, everybody. My inbox is going crazy with people wishing you luck. So get down there and do Canada proud, and go Milos, go Canada, go.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a great day.
You too.
Take care.
Thanks, Canada, for tuning in. We were thrilled to have Milos Raonic with us. That ends our session for today. Thank you to Carl Hale, Tennis Canada for organizing it, and certainly Milos for stepping up, and to all the fans for tuning in. Cheers, everybody, and all the best. Stay safe out there. We look forward to seeing you at the 2021.